Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today, we're taking a bit of an unexpected journey.
Hmm?
We're not digging into, scientific papers or dusty historical texts.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that, cuts through the noise to get to the real heart of the most impactful sources out there. Have you ever started something big, like a startup, maybe a really key project at work, or even just a personal goal that felt, well, daunting? You've got this perfect picture, right? Crystal clear vision of how it's all going to play out. You've got the strategy, the dream team, you've imagined the success, and then bam, reality hits like a ton of bricks. Things don't just kind of not go to plan. They actively start to unravel that amazing vision. Suddenly it's morphing into this cold sweat, knot in your stomach kind of nightmare. And it's that gap, that huge space between the ideal picture and the messy, gritty truth. Oh, that's what most management advice just seems to skip over. They give you all these strategies for when things are humming along nicely, but what about when everything feels like it's fundamentally broken?
That's so true. It's like the conventional wisdom, the stuff you read in those glossy magazines. It often becomes totally useless right when you need it the most. When the rubber really meets the road and you're wrestling with these huge existential questions about your company or maybe just your role in it, those aspirational guides, they offer very little practical help. So this deep dive, it's specifically designed to try and bridge that gap for you.
Exactly. Our mission today is to take a really deep, unfiltered look into a set of sources from Ben Horowitz's, well, seminal book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And this isn't some theoretical blueprint for success, okay? It's raw. It's often brutally honest. It's about the painful reality of building, leading, and, let's be frank, saving a company sometimes. Horowitz really pulls no punches. None at all. He's been an entrepreneur, a CEO, now a venture capitalist. He has absolutely been there, done that. He's seen the highs, sure, but more importantly, he's lived through the really devastating lows. His approach is just so candid, totally unvarnished. It's a stark contrast, and frankly, a refreshing one, to that typical self-help business stuff that only wants to talk about the bright side.
Yeah, and when you zoom out a bit, the real value here for you, our listener, isn't some magic formula for guaranteed success. Because, let's face it, those don't actually exist in the real world. Instead, what you get is this incredibly valuable field guide for navigating what Horowitz just calls the hard things. And he doesn't just offer like prescriptive advice, it's these profoundly personal bits of advice and experience, these insights into the deeper patterns that show up when your dreams suddenly take a nosedive into genuine nightmares. It's kind of a powerful shortcut, really, to understanding what truly matters when the chips are down. It gives you crucial perspectives on how to lead when every single part of you is just screaming, quit.
And his perspective, you can't deny it, it's shaped by this really fascinating, pretty unconventional upbringing. We should unpack this a bit. Horowitz's background. It's not your typical Silicon Valley story at all. He grew up in what he calls the People's Republic of Berkeley with, get this, card-carrying communist grandparents. Just imagine that context. He tells this story, it's quite poignant, about his Jewish father, who was only 11 years old, passing out communist leaflets in Queensbridge, New York, one of the biggest public housing projects in the U.S. For his family, this wasn't some abstract idea, it was lived experience. And Horowitz himself, he was intensely shy as a kid, apparently got kicked out of nursery school for crying too much. And he had this genuinely terrifying encounter with an older kid, Roger. Roger, this bully, dared young Ben to demand a wagon from another boy, Joel Clark Jr., and told him to use a racial slur while doing it. It was this moment designed to force conformity, cruelty, but instead, in this moment of, I guess, unexpected courage, young Ben just asked Joel simply, "Can I ride in your wagon?" And Joel's reply, "Sure." And just like that, from this small kind of counterintuitive interaction, they became best friends.
It's really quite remarkable, isn't it? Because these early experiences, these really personal, vulnerable moments, they directly feed into the critical business insights that just permeate Horowitz's whole philosophy. That incident with Joel Clark Jr., it wasn't just a childhood memory. It taught Horowitz something profound. That being scared didn't mean I was gutless. What I did mattered and would determine whether I would be a hero or a coward. He learned, as he puts it, not to judge things by their surfaces, to see past the initial appearance to something deeper. And crucially, he absorbed this idea that there are no shortcuts to knowledge, especially knowledge gained from personal experience. Following conventional wisdom and relying on shortcuts can be worse than knowing nothing at all. These aren't, abstract theories discussed in a boardroom. They're visceral, hard-won lessons. They form the bedrock of his no-nonsense, deeply human approach to leadership. And yeah, the often brutal realities of business, they teach you that the real test of character comes when you're forced to act, not just when you have plenty of time to plan everything out perfectly.
Okay, so with that really personal foundation laid out, let's dive right into what Horowitz calls the struggle. And this is definitely not the glossy image of startup life, the one plastered all over tech blogs or presented in some slick Jack Dorsey keynote. That vision. Setting a huge goal, hiring brilliant people, drawing up the perfect org chart, and then just watching your company effortlessly crush it. That's the easy part. That's the fantasy. The cold, hard reality. It's often waking up in a cold sweat, feeling totally paralyzed as that beautiful dream just rapidly devolves into a nightmare. The truly hard things, they aren't about scaling smoothly. They're about survival. They involve these agonizing decisions like laying people off when you miss that crucial target, or dealing with great people who somehow develop this entitlement problem, or just trying to get a team to communicate effectively within that beautifully designed org chart when fundamentally communication is just broken down. It's the product problems that seem impossible to fix, the market that isn't developing like you thought it would, key employees losing faith and quitting, and that terrifying feeling when the cash is running critically low.
Exactly. Horowitz defines the struggle not as failure itself, interestingly, but as this perilous kind of inescapable state that actively causes failure. It's an environment that really preys on weakness. As he puts it, quite starkly, it will get you always if you are weak. And this brings up a really critical question for all of us, I think. Why is it that greatness, almost paradoxically, so often seems to emerge from this exact struggle? Horowitz states it pretty unequivocally. Every great entrepreneur, from Steve Jobs to Mark Zuckerberg, went through the struggle and struggle they did, so you are not alone. It's like the crucible where real leaders are forged. It's a challenge that, okay, it doesn't guarantee success, but he presents it as an almost unavoidable prerequisite for achieving real greatness, real resilience. It's in these moments of profound difficulty, when your back's truly against the wall, that's when characters reveal, strategies get sharpened, and often truly innovative solutions are found just out of sheer necessity. It's where you find out what you're really made of.
So, okay, when you find yourself deep in that abyss, when it feels like the walls are closing in and every single path seems blocked, what does Horowitz actually recommend? His advice is immediate, often really counterintuitive and surprisingly human. First thing, and this is a huge shift for a lot of leaders, don't put it all on your shoulders. Sure, as the CEO, you feel the losses, the anxieties, the failures most acutely. Of course you do. Your instinct might be to shield your team from the full weight of the crisis, protect them. But Horowitz argues that transferring that burden, sharing that raw truth with your team, it isn't making things worse. Actually, it's profoundly empowering them. He tells this powerful story from Opsware. When they were just getting their asses kicked competitively, he called an all-hands meeting and just laid bare the terrifying truth. They were going to die if they didn't turn things around, but immediately. He honestly thought he was asking way too much. He figured, after barely surviving the previous company, Loud Cloud, nobody would be up for another do-or-die mission. But what happened next? It completely defied his expectations.
Yeah, the team didn't blink. They didn't panic or get resentful. Instead, they rallied with this almost shocking intensity. They brainstormed solutions, and ultimately, they built the winning product that saved the company. The technical hurdles were huge, but he says, surprisingly, it was also kind of fun. Nobody left. They felt empowered, almost like they'd been thrown into the deep end and told, okay, swim. It forced this individual growth and innovation, even from the most junior people. Horowitz mentions later crying when he read about their experience, realizing just how much that collective struggle and his honesty had truly meant to his team.
Wow, that's powerful.
Thinking about it holistically, this isn't just some survival tactic. It's really a foundational shift in mindset. It redefines leadership. Just the act of openly admitting the struggle instead of trying to insulate the team from the grim reality. It transforms the CEO's personal burden into a collective challenge. It kind of unlocks the organization's collective intelligence, right? It lets everyone focus on real solutions rather than being stuck in self-blame or living under a false sense of security. Horowitz also stresses, this is not checkers, this is motherfucking chess. In the world of tech and business, things change so fast. Tomorrow looks nothing like today. So the immediate number one objective is simply to survive long enough to see what tomorrow brings, because that very next day might just hold the impossible answer, that unexpected pivot that saves you. He also gives advice that sounds harsh at first, but it's ultimately liberating. Don't take it personally. The predicament that you are in is probably all your fault. You hired the people, you made the decisions. Then he quickly clarifies, evaluating yourself and giving yourself an F doesn't help. You have to acknowledge responsibility, sure, but without falling into paralyzing self-blame. Recognize that Everybody makes mistakes. Every CEO makes thousands of mistakes. That psychological release frees the CEO up to focus, laser-like, on the practical, often brutal steps needed for recovery. Horowitz himself admits he got some unexpected luck and help for his own survival, emphasizing that even the toughest leaders don't do it all alone. And ultimately, he frames the struggle as the ultimate test. Remember that this is what separates the women from the girls. If you want to be great, this is the challenge. If you don't want to be great, then you never should have started a company. The core takeaway. True greatness is forged in the fire of these difficulties, not in spite of them.
Okay, Bill, not only did they see the world wasn't as rosy as he painted it, but they also had to sit there while he was blowing sunshine up their butts in every single meeting. This relentlessly positive-only message, he realized, it's deeply detrimental. Why? Because employees know the truth anyway. It stifles real problem-solving because it creates an environment where bad news isn't welcome, and it actively prevents accountability. He even admitted he used to think it was his job, and only his job, to worry about the company's problems. He calls that stupidly wrong now, because he wasn't the one actually writing the code or making the changes needed to fix things.
Right. It's striking how suppressing negative information, even if you have the best intentions, it just paralyzes the collective intelligence of the organization. It stops it from effectively tackling problems. If the CEO is the only one really worrying, then the very people who have the insights and skills to fix the issues, well, they aren't engaged, they aren't empowered, and the information needed to pivot or correct course just isn't flowing freely through the system. Horowitz also gives this strong warning against those popular, seemingly motivational management sayings like, "Don't bring me a problem without bringing me a solution." I mean, on the surface, that sounds great, right? Proactive. But he argues rules like that can quickly become the enemy of free-flowing information. What happens if an employee spots a critical flaw, like a ticking time bomb, but doesn't have the complete solution yet? Do you really want them to just bury that vital information because they haven't cracked the whole answer? These kinds of truisms, when you apply them too rigidly, can accidentally cripple the candid, open communication that's absolutely critical for a company's health, especially during tough times. It just creates a culture of fear where silence feels safer than speaking up.
And then, when things go from bad to worse, maybe the hardest thing of all is that gut-wrenching decision to lay people off. Horowitz tackles this head-on. He calls it a nutty concept, doing something fundamentally wrong, like ending people's livelihoods, but doing it in the right way. He lays out this really clear, empathetic, and meticulously planned process. First, he says you have to get your head right. As CEO, the personal burden, that sense of failure, it's immense. He remembers reading an employee's email after a layoff, calling him either lying or stupid or both, and his immediate internal thought was, definitely stupid. But you have to quickly move past that self-blame and focus squarely on the future of the company and the people who are staying. Second, don't delay. If word gets out about an impending layoff, and it almost always does, employees and managers get thrown into this vortex of anxiety, agitation, rumors. His own painful experience at Loud Cloud Upsware showed how messing up this step, initially hesitating, letting leaks happen, caused chaos. They sharply corrected that and later, more disciplined actions. Third, be crystal clear about why you're laying people off. This is absolutely crucial. You have to state, unequivocally, that the layoff is due to company failure, a market shift, a strategic pivot, not individual performance. The primary message, ironically, isn't just for the people leaving. It's for the people who are staying, because they care deeply about how you treat their colleagues. Admitting company failure, rather than trying to spin it as some kind of cleanup or blaming outside factors, that preserves the vital trust you still have left.
Thinking about that strategically, yeah, transparent and empathetic layoffs, even though they're still inherently painful and traumatic, they're absolutely vital for preserving trust and cultural continuity. That's the bedrock you need for rebuilding. Horowitz emphasizes that the CEO must address the entire company before the layoff notifications actually go out. This company-wide message provides crucial context and, as he puts it, air cover for the managers who then have to deliver the individual bad news. But, he cautions, be careful not to apologize too much. Empathy is key, yes, but the company still needs to project strength and resolve to move forward. After the speech, the CEO must be visible, be present. Every instinct will scream at you to disappear, go to a bar and drink a fifth of tequila, as he famously quipped. But you have to be there. People want to see you. They want to see whether you care. This means being physically present, talking to people, offering words of comfort, maybe helping them carry their things to their cars, just letting them know you appreciate their efforts and you acknowledge their pain. This approach, yeah, it's agonizing, but it contrasts so sharply with less compassionate methods that can permanently damage morale and make future talent retention incredibly difficult. It can cause this downward spiral that a company rarely, if ever, recovers from. The profound takeaway here. Even in the most negative actions, how you conduct yourself can either destroy or preserve the very culture you desperately need to rebuild.
Firing executives or even demoting them, that presents its own unique set of challenges, especially when you initially recruited them by painting this beautiful picture of their future at your amazing company. Horowitz lays out a meticulous 4-step process for firing an executive the right way. Step 1. Root cause analysis. This is often counterintuitive and personally challenging for the CEO. It's not just that the executive sucks or failed. Horowitz argues it's frequently the CEO's fault, a fundamental mistake in the hiring process itself. What are common hiring mistakes? Well, hiring for generic, poorly defined roles instead of specific needs. Bringing in someone bigger, more senior or experienced than you actually need too early, which leads to boredom or disengagement. Or just a fundamental mismatch with the company's current scale or its rapid growth. Like if a company quadruples in size quickly, an executive job totally changes, and maybe they just aren't equipped for that super accelerated pace. Step 2. Informing the board. Your goals here are multiple.
Get their clear support for the decision, secure approval for the separation package, and critically, preserve the executive's reputation as much as possible for their sake and the company's. He stresses making individual phone calls to board members, rather than having some dramatic, potentially confrontational board meeting announcement. It keeps things controlled and respectful.
Yeah, that makes sense. Keep it contained.
Exactly. Step 3. Preparing for the conversation. This means carefully scripting what you'll say, reviewing past performance reviews to make sure everything's consistent, there's a clear paper trail, and most importantly, giving the executive the agency to decide how the news gets communicated to the rest of the company. Horowitz shares this crucial advice from the legendary coach Bill Campbell. You cannot let him keep his job, but you absolutely can let him keep his respect. End quote. This lets the executive exit with as much dignity as possible, minimizing internal resentment and any external reputational damage. Step 4. Preparing company communication. The order and timing here are absolutely critical. Inform direct reports first, then your staff, then the rest of the company, ideally all on the same day to control the narrative. Stop rumors. And crucially, the CEO should temporarily step into the vacant role. Like really step into it, attend their staff meetings, hold the one-on-one, set objectives. This provides vital continuity. It shows leadership during uncertainty, and maybe most importantly, it gives the CEO invaluable firsthand insight into what that role actually demands before hiring the next person. This isn't just theory, right? It's a disciplined, empathetic process designed to prevent significant future turmoil.
This raises a really important question, doesn't it? How does handling executive exits in this mature, disciplined way not only mitigate the immediate fallout, but also fundamentally reinforce the kind of culture and talent management philosophy you want in the company? It demonstrates professionalism, even in the toughest times. When employees see a consistent, fair, respectful process, even for top leaders, it strengthens their trust in the whole organization. And similarly, demoting a loyal friend or a longtime valuable team member, that's equally tough, often riddled with emotional landmines. Horowitz highlights the intense pain of realizing you need someone with more experience for a critical role than a cherished team member who's grown with the company. It's almost impossible to frame that as anything but a demotion, which can be just devastating to someone's self-worth. So he suggests proactively looking for alternatives, like moving them to a different area where their skills align better. It can give them a chance to develop new skills, find renewed purpose, rather than just feeling sidelined. These deliberate, process-driven approaches to really difficult personnel decisions are absolutely fundamental to maintaining long-term organizational health and trust. They prevent that spiral of resentment and declining performance that can just plague a company for years. The core takeaway seems to be that even your hardest decisions have to be executed with this deep sense of responsibility and respect for the human element involved.
Okay, so once you've kind of navigated through the immediate crises, made those painful decisions, how do you actively build an organization that has the resilience baked in, to withstand future struggles? Horowitz points to this profound saying from his old boss, the legendary Jim Barksdale. It's profound because it's so simple. We take care of the people, the products, and the profits in that order. And Horowitz really emphasizes that taking care of the people is by far the most difficult part, yet it's the absolute foundation. Because if you don't do that effectively, if your people aren't supported and engaged, then the other two, your products and your profits, they just won't matter in the long run.
Makes sense. People first.
Right. Horowitz tells this powerful, almost legendary story from Opsware. It was during his management expectations course, where he really drilled down on the non-negotiable importance of one-on-ones. He got deeply frustrated when he found out one of his managers hadn't done a single one-on-one with his direct reports in over 6 months. And he realized, with some exasperation, that his authority alone was not enough to make sure managers were prioritizing this vital part of employee development. This frustration boiled over in his dramatic crystal speech to an executive named Steve. Horowitz explained why I come to work, and it wasn't just about revenue or market share. He articulated with real, raw passion that it was personally very important to me that Opsware be a good company. It's important to me that the people who spend 12 to 16 hours a day here have a good life. He clarified that in good, well-run organizations, people can focus intently on their actual work. They feel confident that good things will happen for them personally and for the company. They find their jobs motivating, fulfilling, not some draining bureaucratic exercise. In poor organizations, though, stark contrast. Employees waste precious time fighting red tape, dealing with infighting, navigating internal politics. His message to Steve was stark, unambiguous. If his direct reports didn't start diligently doing their one-on-ones within 24 hours, both Steve and Steve's manager would be fired. Steve's immediate response, just one word, crystal. It was this moment of true clarity, total commitment.
Wow. Yeah, zooming out from that, being a good company, like a genuinely good place to work, it doesn't always seem to matter when things are going incredibly well, does it? In those boom times, the career path looks wide open. Your friends think you're a genius for working there. Your resume gets stronger every day. Maybe you're getting rich from stock options. But when things take a turn for the worse, when the market shifts or the company struggles, all those external economic reasons for staying suddenly become compelling reasons to leave. The only thing that truly keeps an employee at a company when things go horribly wrong, beyond just the basic need for a job, is that she likes her job, that she feels connected, valued. This emotional and psychological investment employees have in a good workplace, that's the bedrock. It's the hidden resilience factor that lets a company survive when those external economic incentives just disappear. Bill Campbell's experience with Dizio Corporation illustrates this so well. That company ultimately failed financially back in the early 90s, lost almost all its VC money. Yet every single Grego employee Horowitz met later described it as one of the greatest work experiences of their lives. It just shows that being a good company is an end in itself. It fosters a loyalty that goes way beyond just financial outcomes, and that serves as the ultimate wellspring of organizational resilience when the external pressures really mount. It's the ultimate long-term play.
Beyond just fostering a fundamentally good environment, Horowitz is this unwavering champion of training and development. He actively pushes back against that common startup idea that, oh, smart employees don't really need training. He uses this vivid comparison to McDonald's training its employees. He asks, would you want to stand on the line of the untrained person at McDonald's? No, obviously not. He credits Andy Grove's classic book, High Output Management, and specifically its chapter, Why Training is the Boss's Job, for fundamentally changing his own career path and perspective. Grove wrote with just unassailable logic, most managers seem to feel that training employees is a job that should be left to others. I, on the other hand, strongly believe that the manager should do it himself.
Taking ownership.
Exactly. So at Netscape, he found himself really frustrated by inconsistent performance among his product managers. So he took Grove's advice seriously. He wrote this concise, powerful document called Good Product Manager, Bad Product Manager, just to clearly train his team on expectations, best practices. The improvement, he says, was shocking. Even product managers he'd kind of mentally written off became remarkably effective almost overnight. He boils it down to 4 core, compelling reasons why startups, maybe more than any other kind of company, should rigorously train their people. First, productivity. Seems obvious, right? Untrained employees are inherently slower. They make way more mistakes. Directly impacts output. Second, performance management. Training sets clear, unambiguous expectations. It gives you a tangible basis for evaluating performance. Without it, he warns, performance management in your company will be sloppy and inconsistent. Leads to unfairness, confusion. Third, product quality. As companies scale fast, untrained engineers can accidentally duplicate existing features or integrate systems poorly. Leads to this sprawling, incoherent Frankenstein architecture.
Consistent training prevents this by setting shared understanding standards. And fourth, crucially, employee retention. His exit interviews at Netscape consistently showed 2 main, devastating reasons people quit. Either they hated their manager because of a lack of guidance, career development, and feedback, or they felt they were not learning anything because the company wasn't actively investing in their skill development. Training directly hits both of those.
That's really compelling. It covers so many bases.
Yeah. And when it comes to actually implementing training, especially when you're a resource-strapped startup, Horowitz is practical, direct, make it mandatory. For functional training, like product management or engineering best practices, he suggests this powerful incentive: withhold new employee requisitions, basically a hiring freeze for that team, until the managers develop and commit to a proper training program for the roles they want to hire. For management training, he says the CEO should teach the management expectations course themselves. Why? Because they are your expectations. It models the behavior the commitment required. He has this famous quip, it's cuttingly clear: being too busy to train is the moral equivalent of being too hungry to eat. It's just that fundamental to long-term survival.
It's really fascinating how training shifts from being seen as just a cost or a time sink into this indispensable investment that directly impacts every single facet of the business. It becomes a strategic advantage. It drives core productivity, ensures consistent product quality, sets clear performance standards across the board, and, maybe most critically, significantly boosts employee retention. And when senior, accomplished people within the organization are encouraged and empowered to teach, it doesn't just transfer knowledge, it becomes like a badge of honor for them. It fosters this pervasive culture of continuous improvement and knowledge sharing that strengthens the entire organization from the inside out. It's really about building this robust internal ecosystem where learning and development aren't just encouraged, they're ingrained into the very fabric, the daily operations of the company. That provides this deep competitive insulation that few external factors can really penetrate.
Okay, so when you gather a team of really smart people, you inevitably have to deal with some challenging personalities, right? And the insidious creep of office politics. Horowitz, with his typical bluntness, categorizes when smart people are bad employees into 3 distinct types. First, the heretic. This is the person who's intellectually bright, often charismatic, but fundamentally destructive. They build this compelling case that the company, its strategy, maybe its leadership, is just hopeless. They often thrive on being the contrarian. Now, this behavior can come from different places. Maybe they feel genuinely disempowered, maybe they're just fundamental rebels who inherently distrust authority, or maybe they're simply immature and naive, mistaking cynicism for actual insight. Second type, the flake. Brilliant, but maddeningly unreliable. Horowitz shares this poignant real-life story of Arthur, a truly genius engineer whose erratic behavior was eventually traced back to undiagnosed bipolar disorder and a severe drug addiction. That story really drives home Horowitz's crucial point that flaky behavior often has a seriously problematic root cause. It requires empathy and investigation, not just dismissing them. Third type, the jerk. This is the individual, often at the executive level, who's disruptive, arrogant, and actively destroys communication through belligerent or disrespectful behavior. Horowitz's advice on this one: no ambiguity. If one of your big dogs destroys communication on your staff, you need to send her to the pound. He uses these powerful sports analogies here, like John Madden's holding the bus for volatile but brilliant players like Terrell Owens, or Phil Jackson managing Dennis Rodman. The lesson: you can realistically tolerate only one such individual in your organization, and only if their contribution is truly exceptionally high, making the disruption almost worth it. Any more than that, your culture fractures.
Yeah, that rings true. One disruptive force can poison the well pretty quickly.
Totally. Building on that, let's explore how to minimize politics in your company. Because politics, as Horowitz defines it, it's just people advancing their careers or agendas by means other than merit and contribution. Simple as that. And he points out, CEOs often unintentionally create a political environment. For example, giving ad hoc raises whenever someone asks, instead of through a structured performance review. That inadvertently rewards political behavior, negotiating, maneuvering over actual demonstrable performance. He offers 2 key, powerful techniques to significantly minimize politics and really foster a meritocratic environment. First, hire people with the right kind of ambition, not personal ambition at all costs, but ambition for the company's collective success, with personal success just being a natural byproduct. He advises looking for candidates who view the world through a team prism rather than me prism during interviews. Someone with the me prism might say something like, my last job was my e-commerce play. I felt it was important to round out my resume. Someone with the team prism, they'll instinctively deflect credit, be more interested in how your company will collectively win, not just their individual glory. Second, and this is crucial, build strict processes for potentially political issues and do not deviate from them. Never. This specifically includes processes for performance evaluation and compensation, organizational design and territory allocation, and especially promotions. Formal, visible, demonstrably defensible promotion processes, often involving cross-functional promotions councils that level promotions fairly across different groups. Essential. This ensures fairness. It prevents problems like the infamous Peter Principle, where people rise to their level of incompetence, or that cynical but often accurate law of crappy people, which is when your best talent walks out because mediocre performance isn't just tolerated, it's even rewarded or promoted unfairly.
This raises a critical question, though. How can a company, especially a fast-growing startup, successfully maintain high standards and a genuinely meritocratic culture when you're dealing with all these diverse personalities and just the natural human tendency towards self-interest? Horowitz's insights on managing these challenging types and building robust, transparent processes are fundamental to long-term organizational health sustainability. For instance, his discussion on titles and promotions highlights two seemingly opposite but equally valid philosophies. Mark Andreessen argues for giving high titles cheaply because they're by far the cheapest incentive a company has. Makes sense. Conversely, Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook purposely uses titles that are significantly lower than the industry standard. Why? To screen for specific types of employees, those driven by impact, not prestige, and to force internal releveling as people prove themselves. Both methods have merit, right? But the underlying principle is having a disciplined, explicit system that reinforces the desired culture and values, rather than letting politics and unstated assumptions undermine merit and foster resentment. It's about designing your organization to be inherently resilient to, well, human nature.
When it comes to hiring strategies, bringing big company executives into little companies, that's a challenge often filled with peril, leads to frustration on both sides. Horowitz pinpoints two dangerous mismatches that happen frequently. The first is a rhythm mismatch. Big company execs, they're used to an interrupt-driven environment. Their days are filled responding to a constant stream of emails, calls, scheduled meetings started by others. In a fast-paced startup, though, nothing happens unless you make it happen, meaning they'll be waiting a very long time for those external prompts to come in. This leads to profound frustration for the executive, and critically, suspicion from other employees who start wondering, what does that guy actually do all day long? The second is a skill set mismatch. Large, mature organizations need skills like optimizing existing businesses, complex cross-functional decision-making, process improvement. Startups, totally different. They demand the ability to create from scratch, a relentless focus on high-quality hiring, deep domain expertise, and extreme creativity in starting new directions. Horowitz suggests pointed interview questions to screen for these mismatches, like, what will you do in your first month on the job, and how will your new job differ from your current job? You're looking for deep self-awareness and inherent bias towards taking proactive initiative rather than just reacting.
That distinction is key, the proactive versus reactive mindset.
Totally. And what if you're the CEO and you've never actually done the job you're trying to hire for? Hiring executives when you've never done the job yourself. That's a common, terrifying challenge for founders. Horowitz warns against several pitfalls. Hiring solely on look and feel, someone who just seems like a leader. Hiring someone straight out of central casting, that perfect ideal that doesn't actually exist. Or, maybe the most dangerous, valuing lack of weakness rather than strength. This one's insidious. You focus so much on avoiding any perceived negatives that you miss out on truly exceptional strengths. He passionately argues for rigorously writing down the desired strengths and explicitly deciding which weaknesses you can tolerate. He tells the incredible, almost infamous story of hiring Mark Cranny as head of sales at Opsware, as Cranny was, well, unconventional. Famously told a group of new hires at a previous company, if you don't bring me $500,000 a quarter, I'm putting a bullet in your head. Wow. Okay? So many in the company saw him as a terrible cultural fit in normal times. But Horowitz recognized they were in a war, and he needed a wartime general.
Cranny had this almost mythical sales FBI, a network so deep he could get intelligence on deals. He provided 75 references who all called back within an hour, unequivocally singing his praises. So what does this all mean? It means sometimes you need someone who might not be a perfect cultural fit in peacetime, someone who might even make people uncomfortable, but is absolutely essential for survival in wartime. Their specific, unique strengths are the only thing that can get you through.
That's a stark example of prioritizing wartime needs over peacetime comfort.
Exactly. And finally, Horowitz touches on this surprisingly delicate, often fraught question. Is it okay to hire people from your friend's company? He calls this the Mitchell dilemma, named after a hypothetical brilliant engineer at a friend's company whom your top engineer desperately wants to hire. Logically, you might think your friend, the other CEO, would prefer Mitchell goes to you a trusted peer rather than a direct competitor, right? But Horowitz explains that
A logical issue quickly becomes an emotional one. Your friend is likely fighting for their company's life, just like you are. Losing a great employee, especially to a friend, it feels like a profound betrayal, a painful hit to their morale, especially if their own employees see it as Kathy's so-called friend is raiding her company. He uses this powerfully relatable analogy. It's like your best friend dating your ex-husband. Logically, you know your ex will eventually date someone, but emotionally, it's deep and it almost certainly damages the friendship, regardless of logic. The emotional fallout often just outweighs any perceived logical benefit.
Yeah, the logic versus emotion trap. When we connect all this to the broader picture, these insights into hiring really emphasize the absolute necessity for a comprehensive, deeply disciplined, and often counterintuitive approach to getting and integrating talent. It highlights that just being smart or experienced isn't enough. The right fit for the specific company stage for the specific role, that's paramount. Bill Campbell, the legendary mentor to so many Silicon Valley CEOs, developed this framework for evaluating execs across 4 crucial areas: results against objectives, management effectiveness, innovation, and working with peers. This holistic view helps ensure you're not just hiring for immediate output, but for long-term organizational health, cultural alignment, sustained impact. Horowitz also points out the nuanced value of internal versus external knowledge for different roles. Like for engineering, deep internal knowledge of your specific code base is critical, but for sales, extensive external knowledge of customers, markets, the competitive landscape is often more vital. These subtle yet vital distinctions are fundamental for making the right hiring decisions that truly support the company's evolving strategic needs, making sure you're building a team not just for today, but for the battles ahead.
Okay, now Horowitz introduces this truly seminal concept that every leader, really, not just CEOs, should grasp. The stark difference between a peacetime CEO and a wartime CEO. He famously calculates with this wry sense of humor that he was a peacetime CEO for 3 days and wartime CEO for 8 years. Wow. The core difference between these two types is profound. A peacetime CEO, they're focused on maximizing broad opportunity, building scalable systems, expanding market share, tolerating deviations for innovation. They're often calm, measured, focused on the big picture. A wartime CEO, totally different beast. They're laser focused on survival, often operating with a single bullet in the chamber that must hit the target, no matter what. They obsess over every tiny detail, every speck of dust on a gnat's ass. They're willing to violate protocol. They have to execute agonizing layoffs. They understand that the war defines the culture, not the other way around. They roll a hard 6 instead of relying on some contingency plan. They are completely intolerant of deviations from the mission. They rarely speak normally, often heighten contradictions just to force action. Think of Steve Jobs returning to Apple when it was literally weeks from bankruptcy. That's quintessential wartime. He didn't care about consensus, about niceties. He cared solely about survival and ruthlessly eliminating anything that wasn't core. Horowitz also points to Eric Schmidt stepping down as Google CEO for Larry Page. Schmidt was the classic peacetime CEO, skillfully leading expansion, optimizing a thriving business. Page took over with the clear intent of being a wartime CEO, fundamentally shifting Google back to a founder-led, high-stakes, direct execution model.
That is genuinely fascinating, because it highlights how the CEO's primary directive, and therefore their whole persona, their decision-making framework, their actions, has to fundamentally shift based on the company's existential state. It's not about being good or bad. It's about being absolutely appropriate for the specific environment you're in, especially when survival is on the line. The very qualities that make an exceptional peacetime leader can actively undermine a company in wartime and vice versa. A peacetime CEO's patience, their consensus building, that can be fatal when speed and decisive action are paramount. Conversely, a wartime CEO's intense focus, their intolerance for deviation, that might stifle innovation when the goal is broad exploration. The ability to accurately recognize which war you're actually in and to adapt your leadership style, maybe even your very being, accordingly. That's a critical, often painful skill for any CEO. It's about this relentless commitment to the survival of the company, even if it means doing things that are uncomfortable, deeply unpopular, or go against every natural human tendency to just be liked.
And speaking of uncomfortable, Horowitz delves into what he calls the unnatural motions of a CEO. Being a CEO, he says, requires doing lots of unnatural motion. Our natural human tendency, right? Deeply ingrained for survival. It's to do things that make people like us, foster connection, acceptance. But to be a truly effective CEO, you often have to do things that upset people in the short run, precisely so that you can be liked, or maybe more accurately, respected in the long run. He uses this powerful analogy of a boxing stance. You have to rigorously train yourself to move unnaturally, like picking up your back foot first when going backward. Otherwise, you'll get knocked cold in a fight. Same principle applies to a CEO. It would feel totally bizarre, rude even, to evaluate a friend's joke by saying, "Gee, I thought that story really sucked. I suggest that you go back, rework it, and present it to me again tomorrow." Yet rigorously evaluating performance, giving candid, direct feedback, constantly pushing for improvement. That's exactly what a CEO must do, often to people they genuinely like and respect.
That's a tough reality. The job requires you to act against instincts sometimes.
For sure. And giving feedback, he says, that's the unnatural atomic building block of management. He discusses the ubiquitous shit sandwich technique, compliment, criticism, compliment, often popularized by books like The 1-Minute Manager. And while, okay, maybe it can work with very junior employees who crave positive reinforcement, it's often too formal. It lacks authenticity after a few tries. And crucially, senior execs see right through it. They find it patronizing. Horowitz himself experienced this firsthand. He was told bluntly by a senior employee, "Spare me the compliment, Ben, and just tell me what I did wrong." To be truly effective, he stresses, feedback isn't one size fits all. It has to consistently focus on employee development, never embarrass peers or undermine their standing, and it must be carefully tailored to the individual's personality, how they best receive information. It has to be direct, unambiguous, timely, but never mean-spirited. Watered-down feedback can be worse than no feedback at all because it just creates confusion, avoids the real issue. And crucially, feedback should always be a dialogue, not a monologue. You need to actively encourage argument to conclusion. Your goal is to apply tremendous intellectual pressure for the highest quality thinking, while simultaneously being genuinely open to being wrong yourself. Fostering an environment where challenging ideas is seen as the path to truth, not insubordination.
Yeah, if we connect that to the broader organizational culture, a workplace where constant, direct, unvarnished feedback is just the norm, well, it means bad news travels fast. It fosters this pervasive sense of trust and a relentless focus on problem solving rather than fear and hiding information. Horowitz notes that if the CEO consistently and transparently gives feedback, employees get used to it. They learn to focus on the issues, on the path to improvement, rather than constantly worrying about whether the CEO likes them or if their job is on the line. This creates an environment where people become truly comfortable discussing bad news, sharing mistakes, highlighting problems. That allows those issues to be addressed quickly, efficiently, before they fester and become totally intractable. This raises an important question. How do you actively cultivate an environment where bad news travels fast instead of slowly rotting in the shadows? It's about consciously creating a culture of psychological safety, trust, shared responsibility, where the collective health and survival of the company unequivocally comes before individual comfort or the desire to avoid difficult conversations. It's really a test of leadership maturity.
Another fascinating paradox Horowitz explores is this delicate balance between accountability versus creativity. How do you effectively hold people accountable for commitments, for deliverables, for results, without accidentally stifling the very risk-taking and innovation that are essential for growth, especially in a startup? And conversely, if you don't hold them accountable, how do you prevent just profound demoralization among those high-performing people who do consistently deliver? He shares this harrowing, nail-biting story from the Opsware sale to HP. Their auditor, Ernst & Young, threatened to derail the entire $1.65 billion deal at the 11th hour over this seemingly obscure legal clause, known as the CA clause, in just 3 of their bank contracts. The accounting interpretation meant they'd have to restate revenue, a move that could immediately kill the entire massive deal. Horowitz, his CFO, and the head of sales, Mark Cranny, stayed up all night calling every single contact they knew, leveraging every favor, somehow managing to get 3 large international banks to amend their contracts in less than 24 hours. This frantic, all-out, seemingly impossible effort saved the deal. It just demonstrates the brutal reality of accountability for results sometimes.
Wow, that's incredible pressure. Talk about high stakes.
Seriously. Yeah. Building on that, he breaks down accountability across 3 critical dimensions. Effort, which is relatively easy to hold people accountable for demanding world-class commitment, dedication, promises, critical to hold people accountable for simple, clear commitments they make, and results, where, yeah, he admits it gets significantly more complicated, more nuanced. For results, accountability depends heavily on several factors. The employee's seniority, you expect more from experienced leaders, the inherent degree of difficulty of the problem or task. Was the problem fundamentally hard, requiring innovative, uncertain solutions? And crucially, the amount of stupid risk taken. Was the risk a calculated, intelligent gamble, or just a reckless, ill-conceived one? Reimagining that opening problem of an architect missing a scaling deadline, he asked the probing questions. Was it a teaching moment for a junior architect who learned from a misstep? Or was the problem so fundamentally hard that it was a miracle it even scaled at all? making the failure actually a testament to their effort? Or was the original risk to pursue that scaling path a worthwhile calculated gamble that simply didn't pay off, but yielded invaluable learning? The distinction matters deeply for how you judge performance and foster future innovation.
This raises such an essential question. How do you elegantly balance the undeniable need for execution and clear deliverables with the profound understanding that innovation and problem solving, particularly in complex fields like tech, often require taking creative risks that might not follow a predictable path? In the technology business, Horowitz reminds us you rarely know everything up front. The difference between a company that just stays mediocre and one that achieves something magical often lies precisely in its ability to navigate this tension, to hold people accountable for genuine effort and basic promises, while simultaneously fostering an environment where smart, calculated risks aren't just tolerated, but actively encouraged, even if they don't always pan out immediately. It's about creating systems that reward learning from failure, not just avoiding it, and understanding that the path to breakthrough often involves a series of educated guesses and informed detours.
In this never-ending, often brutal journey of being a CEO, continuous learning and evolution are absolutely paramount, non-negotiable. Horowitz issues this strong warning against what he calls the scale anticipation fallacy. It's this counterproductive, almost magical thinking of trying to judge executives' ability to scale in advance. He passionately argues why this is profoundly wrong and damaging. Managing at scale, it's an intensely learned skill, not some innate talent. It's practically impossible to judge in advance. I mean, was it truly obvious Bill Gates would scale Microsoft into a global empire? Prejudging an executive's future scaling potential often retards their current development because you're looking past their present contributions. Hiring scalable execs too early is a common mistake because they might be terrible at the current smaller scale your company operates at. And ultimately, he points out, you still have to make the judgment at the actual point in time when scaling is needed, just with less valuable data if you've been fixated on the future all along. Plus, this fallacy often leads to this dark place within the company: information hiding, dishonesty, and stilted communication, as people try to project an image of future readiness. Instead, he advises a simple, powerful counter. Evaluate your team at least once a quarter on all dimensions, focusing squarely on whether an executive can do the job effectively at the current scale, and making judgments on a relative rather than an absolute scale.
That makes so much more sense. Focus on the now, evaluate regularly.
Exactly. He also revisits what he calls the first rule of entrepreneurship: there are no rules. Now, this isn't an excuse for chaos. Rather, it's this profound belief in calculus over statistics when you're building a company. He recounts this deeply personal and illustrative conversation with Bill Campbell. When LoudCloud was staring down the barrel of bankruptcy, Campbell presented Horowitz with the overwhelming, statistically dire odds of survival. Horowitz's response: it was a testament to his entrepreneurial mindset. He chose not to play the odds, he states. With this clarity forged in fire, when you are building a company, you must believe there is an answer, and you cannot pay attention to your odds of finding it. You just have to find it. Your task, he argues, remains the same, whether your chances are 9 in 10 or 1 in 1,000. That relentless pursuit of the solution, regardless of the daunting statistics, that's the CEO's ultimate responsibility.
That really encapsulates the CEO's ultimate defining skill, doesn't it? The ability to focus and make the best move when there are no good moves. It's during those WFIO moments where it's over, those deeply private existential crises that nearly every company, no matter how successful, goes through. That's when a CEO truly makes their indelible mark. Horowitz himself developed crucial coping techniques for these times, talking honestly to peers who'd been through similar gut-wrenching challenges. And the deceptively simple act of getting overwhelming problems out of your head and onto paper to separate raw emotion from cold, hard logic, allowing clarity to emerge. When asked how they succeeded through such impossible odds, the consistent answer from truly great CEOs, regardless of their industry or background, is starkly simple: I didn't quit. This relentless commitment to finding a path forward, even when none seems apparent, the sheer refusal to surrender. That's the ultimate testament to a CEO's personal growth, their profound resilience, and their unwavering dedication to their people and their vision. It's a silent strength that defines true leadership.
Which brings us beautifully to the transition and legacy of Ben Horowitz himself. From the hard-won sale of Opsware to the groundbreaking creation of Andreessen Horowitz. After selling Opsware to HP for a staggering $1.6 billion, Horowitz initially felt this profound emptiness. He describes being sick, unable to sleep, even crying, overwhelmed by the feeling of letting go of what he had meticulously built for 8 grueling years. But he soon realized with this liberating clarity that it was the smartest thing I'd ever done in my career.
They built something from absolute nothing, saw it almost return to nothing during the struggle, and then painstakingly rebuilt it into a significant, valuable franchise.
That's quite a journey, from near death to a huge exit.
Absolutely. And the powerful inspiration for Andreessen Horowitz, the venture capital firm. It emerged from this deep, shared frustration between Horowitz and Mark Andreessen. They were deeply troubled by the common VC practice of replacing founders with professional CEOs, despite their unwavering belief that technical founders are the best people to run technology companies.
Yeah.
Their unique approach was to build a firm specifically designed to help technical founders run their own companies, directly addressing two key deficits they saw in the traditional VC model: the critical CEO skill set, managing execs, org design, sales, etc., which founders often lack formal training in, and just as importantly, the vital CEO network, connections to seasoned execs, crucial customers, influential press, strategic investors.
So they weren't just providing capital, but also the operational support structure.
Exactly. They boldly modeled their firm's integrated network after Michael Ovitz's Creative Artists Agency, CAA, which had totally revolutionized the Hollywood talent agency business. CAA's breakthrough was building a firm-wide network where any agent could connect clients to this vast, interconnected grid of opportunities, making the entire firm exponentially more powerful than any individual agent. Andreessen Horowitz copied this blueprint. They created specialist partners dedicated to running and leveraging networks for large enterprise companies, connecting with top executives, recruiting engineers, engaging with press and analysts, cultivating investor relationships. They even brought over former Opsware execs like Mark Craney, Shannon Callahan, and Frank Chen to lead these specialized high-impact networks, creating this truly unique and powerful ecosystem for their portfolio companies.
Wow, what's truly compelling here is the full circle of Horowitz's journey, isn't it? His own profound struggles as a CEO, the very insecurities he felt about not having those innate professional CEO skills. They directly informed his mission to build a venture firm that fundamentally changes how founders are supported and empowered. He describes this period as the end of the beginning, a moment where he found personal peace in finally being able to openly share his weaknesses and fears as a VC, no longer needing to project that relentless, unrelenting confidence that defines a CEO in wartime. By creating a firm specifically focused on providing those missing CEO skill sets and that crucial network, Andreessen Horowitz fostered a new community. It fundamentally changed the venture capital landscape and, arguably, the future of tech leadership. It profoundly underscores how personal experiences, even the most painful ones, can be transformed into the very foundation for a truly transformative and lasting legacy. Hashtag outro.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Ben Horowitz's The Hard Thing about hard things, what are the core, enduring lessons we've really absorbed today? It's the unvarnished reality of the struggle. That it's not just a sign of failure, but often a crucible for greatness. It's the absolute necessity of candid, hard truth communication, even maybe especially when it's uncomfortable. It's the fundamental importance of truly caring for your people, recognizing that their emotional investment is your ultimate resilience. It's the value of continuous learning and adaptation, understanding that your role and the company's needs are constantly evolving. And perhaps most powerfully, it's that stark life-or-death difference between leading in peacetime versus wartime and the wisdom to know which mode you're actually in. Horowitz's journey just reminds us in such vivid detail that the path to building something truly great is messy, it's painful, it's often counterintuitive, and it's profoundly human.
Yeah, and when we connect this to the bigger picture, Horowitz's journey really underscores a profound insight. Truly impactful leadership isn't about avoiding mistakes or pain, because let's face it, those are inevitable. It's fundamentally about how you respond to them. It's about a relentless commitment to learning, to adapting, and to doing those unnatural things that go against human comfort and instinct, all in unwavering service of the team and the company's survival. It's about a profound sense of responsibility to the people who are dedicating their lives to your vision, even and especially when that vision seems to be crumbling around you. It's that quiet strength forged in the crucible of adversity.
The book's title, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, it almost implies that the difficulty is the thing itself. You know, the layoff, the market crash, the problematic employee. But perhaps, as this deep dive suggests, the hardest thing of all isn't just doing those hard things. Maybe it's being the person who can consistently face them, learn from them, lead through them, and ultimately refuse to quit, even when every logical indicator is just screaming for surrender. What hard thing in your own journey are you ready to face head-on with this newly informed perspective?